Thank you very much for watching us. We are here in Canberra. Pleased to say one of my favourites here in Canberra, and I'm sorry to do that to you, is Fiona Scott, who is the member for Lindsay, a Liberal MP. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
In Melbourne, our progressive friend Nicholas Rees from Melbourne University, who had a very interesting occasion today with none other than Al Gore. How are you, mate? All right, and you're very pleased that I'm wearing a slightly academic jacket, which I like as well. The dirty corduroy.
I am. It's your Canberra look.
Yeah, it's my new Canberra look. Well, I think there's a scarf somewhere around here. Oh God, I'll end up voting Green. Let's get back on track though. A man who keeps me straight and narrow, and that'd be none other than the great Chris Kenny, my mate from the Australian and also colleague here at Sky News. How are you, big fella?
Good, Paul. The main reason I like coming on your show Thursday nights is a bit of a man hug at the start, but I'm feeling a bit lonely here tonight.
All right, don't worry. I'll give you a bit of a cuddle later. I'll come special before the show tomorrow. Now, we know there's been a deal done to some extent between Clive Palmer and Tony Abbott. Clive Palmer today, despite last night, the farce of this bloke turning up with Al Gore, and we'll get to that in a second, he did a press conference at 10 o'clock at night. He did 4 media appearances before 9 o'clock this morning. He was on Channel 2. He was everywhere to be seen, and here's part of what he had to say after the meeting with the PM.
I think he was positively encouraged by what we were trying to achieve, especially there was a meeting of our minds of the importance to make sure that Australians get back their fair share from any removal of the carbon tax, and I pointed out in the Act that it wasn't mandatory. It was something the ACCC could do, but it wasn't mandatory, and it should be mandatory because if people don't have to pay the tax, well, the average consumer shouldn't have to pay higher electricity prices.
All right, now, Chris, I don't have a lot of time for Clive Palmer, so if you want to feel free to offer whatever olive branch you wish to. I think what he did yesterday in the stump with Al Gore was debasing for Al Gore. I understand why he did it. Politically, he got the 6 p.m. news and all the rest of it. But who gets the win here? The PM because the carbon tax disappears, or Clive Palmer because he's the man who made it happen?
Well, they're both winners, Paul. The main winner, of course, is Tony Abbott and the government because they're going to get things through. But Clive Palmer's managed to win a bit more glory from the sort of green left in the media who love to praise him. The ABC and others were hailing him most of yesterday and this morning, suggesting somehow that he's brokered something new on climate change and he's hurt Tony Abbott's carbon tax repeal proposal. I mean, it's just been ludicrous the last 24 hours. You've never seen a better insight into sort of superficiality of our media reporting what they want to happen rather than what's actually happening. What's transpired here in a policy sense is virtually zero. We're ending up with exactly what we thought we would end up with, that is Clive Palmer supporting the repeal of the carbon tax, not liking direct action, and a bit of argy-bargy around the side so that everyone looks like they're wheeling and dealing properly. The big stunt with Al Gore was simply an attempt by Clive Palmer to avoid being denounced as the climate denier by the ABC and the Fairfax Press and the rest of the love media, and they fell for it. It was so obvious from the moment they took the stage and started speaking. It was so obvious what was going on, yet the media, actually serious journalists at the ABC and the like, were somehow suggesting this was a breakthrough on climate policy. We're now going to end up with no climate action whatsoever in Australia, thanks to what Labor, the Greens and Clive Palmer are cooking up.
Yeah, now, Nicholas, I want to get your view in a second here, but Fiona, obviously, you get to go back to Penrith, you get to say we're going to beat the carbon tax, but obviously Clive Palmer is the reason that has happened. Yeah. Is there enough of a win to go back and say you get what you want?
I actually think there absolutely is. I mean, leading to the last election, I door-knocked over 30,000 houses, and people want to see this tax gone. They feel duped in 2010 by a Prime Minister saying there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead, and then in it comes. So I think what the people wanted to see, and Tony Abbott was very clear that this was the mandate we were going for, was that he will be the Prime Minister that delivers on his promise and he will repeal the carbon tax. And today we passed it through the lower house, and with the new Senate we'll be getting rid of this carbon tax.
All right, what does it show about, is it the Prime Minister's capacity to deal with Clive Palmer or the other way around? Who has had the come-to-Jesus moment here?
Look, I think this is just the nature of a Westminster system of parliament. I mean, negotiations with the Senate is nothing new. in fact, most of John Howard's term, he was negotiating with the Senate to get any of the really big reforms through. So it's not like we're in a new paradigm here of having to negotiate with different parties within the Senate. So I think this is just the argy-bargy of what we see here in Canberra.
OK, here's part of what the PM had to say in question time about the whole issue and particularly dealing with Clive Palmer.
Member for Fairfax is absolutely right. Abolishing the carbon tax will make our industries more competitive and it will make our people's lives more manageable. And I do look forward to working with the member for Fairfax and crossbench senators. I look forward to working with him to ensure that all the savings from the abolition of the carbon tax are passed on.
All right, it should also be noted that Clive Palmer, despite making that giant media splash, walked out halfway through question time and presumably went home early. Deserved an early mark for all of his, well, talking in front of cameras. Nicholas Rees is a bloke who was part of a government that wanted to bring in the price on carbon, that went through the difficulties of the 2010 election, that went through the difficulties of negotiating and finally getting something, to now see that basically first week in July, you don't even get direct action. How do you feel?
Well, look, you're right, Paul. I did spend many years working to try and get a price put on carbon, and so, you know, on a very personal level, this is a sad day for me. But I think much more importantly, it's a dark day for Australia. I mean, we have taken a backward step in terms of taking serious action to tackle climate change today, and it's something that, you know, our children will look darkly upon us for. I will say, however, that I think we are in a much better position than we were probably a week ago, when it was looking like all the various elements that came with the clean energy scheme were going to be overturned. And as a result of Clive Palmer and, more importantly, Al Gore's intervention, we have managed to save quite a few important parts of the scheme. Most significantly, the Climate Change Authority is going to stay. That gives independent advice to the Parliament, not to the government, but to the Parliament independently about the state of the science and the emission reduction targets that are needed. The Clean Energy Authority has been kept as well. That is doing great work in finding energy reduction or renewable energy investments. The renewable energy target is being kept as well, which is going to do a lot in the short term to get investment in renewable energy, which will bring down emission levels. And importantly as well, Clive Palmer has indicated that he is going to support the emissions trading scheme and the architecture around that once other countries, our major trading partners, introduce comparable schemes. So that's sort of something as well.
But there is this high fast, though, Nicholas, of saying, I want an ETS, but it's set at zero until, essentially, not part of the planets, but hard to think any time in the next little while, getting the planets of China and the US to combine. I mean, we're about to see, most likely, but we are most likely about to see Republicans rise in the congressional elections. Just because Hillary may run doesn't mean there's going to be a Democratic president, let alone issues to do with China. I just don't hold out hope that if you believe in an ETS, you get one anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, look, I spent a lot of time looking at these things, and I've got to say I have a different view. I mean, we're a long way from the rest of the world sometimes in Australia, and I think sometimes we don't actually know what's going on in the rest of the world. Or so if you look around the world, in fact, they are moving towards an emissions trading scheme, and I actually hold out quite a bit of hope that in 2015, when we are having International Climate Conference, that we will see something significant put on the table. I mean, let's not forget, there's over 20 states now in the US that have an emissions trading scheme. Korea, one of the countries that got mentioned, they're introducing a emissions trading scheme next year. China has 7 pilot schemes underway. Europe's already moved, and Japan's moving as well. So you look around the world at these major trading partners. In fact, they are all moving to an emissions trading scheme. And so I think there is actually a real prospect that we will have something comparable in these countries in 2015, which could potentially be the trigger for an emissions trading scheme recommencing in Australia.
Well, Chris, what about that? I mean, what about Clive Palmer? Look, I mean, even if he gets it through the Senate, it gets killed off in the lower house, so it's not going to happen. But what about, I mean, I think it's a shell game, personally.
Paul, look, it's just nonsense. I've been biting my tongue here listening to Nicholas go on in this delusional rant about how somehow Clive Palmer and Labor have managed to salvage something from this. They've lost everything. There is not going to be an emissions trading scheme in Australia. If you rated it at $0, it would sit there at $0 for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Who knows? It's a ludicrous proposition. At this very moment, the carbon tax is about to go to $25.40 next month, and you're suggesting you're going to go to zero for the next 10 years, and that means nothing. I mean, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation won't have any more money going into it because there's no carbon tax to put the money into it. What's going to happen here? What we're going to see happen here most likely, although nothing is predictable in this parliament, but what we're likely to see is just as the Greens helped to block Kevin Rudd's carbon pollution reduction scheme, and then the Greens forced Julia Gillard into her political disaster of a carbon tax, the Greens with Labor now are going to vote down Tony Abbott's direct action scheme so that there is no scheme to abate carbon in Australia, no scheme to reduce emissions. So they've gone backwards over the last week, unless either the Greens or Labor has a change of heart and figures direct action is better than nothing.
Yeah, Nicholas, you're going to reply in a second, but I just want to just to keep the conversation even, Nicholas, in a second. Fiona, about that idea though, you went to an election at 2013 saying direct action. Yep. You don't even get direct action under this.
Look, I think direct action's a great program. I mean, locally for me in Western Sydney, I mean, we have a $15 million plan, which $7.5 million is toward land acquisition, another $7.5 million which is towards the actual Green Army. That's 150 teams of 10 people, and it's a double whammy here. We're going to be replanting vast parts of the Cumberland Conservation Corridor. These are the lungs of Western Sydney that we're talking about. So this is actually talking, not only are you going to get these carbon targets, you're going to be improving the health of people that are living in these areas, not to mention some of the social impacts of these to actually have the training of what the Green Army is. I mean, the direct action plan for me, I think it's a brilliant package. I think Greg Hunt has been amazing with the way he's been out there, and it actually has a direct action in the environment, and that's what's so good about this.
All right, but Nicholas, you can either respond to what Fiona said or what Chris was saying, but I do want to move on to Al Gore, so go whichever way you want.
Wow, there's just a lot to get into there. I mean, look, I think Chris came up with a lot of conjecture there, but it is a fact. Korea's moving next year on emission trading scheme. Over 20 states in the US. Europe's already got emission trading scheme. So a lot of things he was saying there was just wrong.
That European scheme's going very well, isn't it, Nicholas? And how's China going in Japan?
I patiently listened to you through there.
I patiently listened to a lot of what you're saying as well. But are you seriously suggesting that all our trading partners will have countrywide, comprehensive emissions trading schemes sometime inside the next 20 years? Are you seriously proposing that?
Yes, I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is inevitable that we are going to have a price on pollution, and this is a problem that is not going away.
All right. Well, Nicholas, I want to move to Al Gore here, which is, I don't know what was said. I don't want you to break Chatham House rules, but as best as you can, did Al Gore give any indication of why the hell was he in Canberra yesterday? Clive Palmer's line is that Al Gore's people got in touch with him. Look, I would like to see the proof of that. Let me put it that way. Nicholas, why was he here, and what role did he actually play? Because it seemed absurd to me that a guy like Clive Palmer, who's made hundreds of millions of dollars out of ripping stuff out of the ground, a miner, is going to be standing next to a bloke who has won a Nobel Peace Prize for talking about climate change, that he's going to stand next to a bloke who has in the past said that the CIA is involved in the Australian environmental movement. Why was he here?
It is true that Al Gore's people did reach out to Clive Palmer. Al Gore was in Canberra for a limited amount of time. He was asked if he wanted to meet with people. He said absolutely he would, and it was suggested to him that Clive Palmer might be a good person to meet with, given the power he has in the new Senate. Now, we shouldn't forget that Clive Palmer is a very keen follower of American politics, so he has noted that President Obama has moved significantly on climate change policy in recent times, and that was quite a significant thing for Clive. And when Al Gore sat down with him and went through the various parts of the clean energy package, Clive changed his mind. He came to the view that things like the Climate Change Authority, which gives that independent advice to Parliament, is a good thing. Clean Energy Corporation is making significant money for the government investing in low energy projects. Clive's a businessman. He was persuaded by that. He also knows that the world is moving on emissions trading scheme, and so he accepts the sense that when the rest of the world moves, Australia should as well. So he was actually persuaded by the arguments of these things. I think Al Gore, he's well known as a global crusader on climate change. He's also a pragmatist, and he knows that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good, and he was prepared to meet with him to achieve these compromises.
This is just silly,
right,
Paul.
Chris,
this is just silly. Al Gore's been played off a break here. Al Gore, sure, he wants to do a favour for Clive Palmer because Clive Palmer donates millions of dollars to the JFK Museum in Boston. And so, he's a friend of the American Democrats and they want to look after him. But this is a guy, Al Gore, who claims to have invented the internet. 10 minutes on Google would have told them that he's dealing with a guy here who's got a nickel refinery and wants to make billions exporting coal. Clive Palmer has won here because Clive Palmer will pay no carbon tax on his business interests. Clive Palmer doesn't care if poor people and families around Australia pay higher electricity prices because the renewable energy target is kept. That doesn't worry him. Clive Palmer gets out of the carbon tax. Al Gore, what little credibility he has left, he's shot a great big hole in his massive carbon footprint.
All right, well, this is what Dennis Jensen, a Liberal MP, had to say a bit earlier in the day in Canberra. Have a look.
So we see yet more hypocrisy from Al Gore, the global warming guru. And I say that in every negative context associated with the word. Last night, Al Gore proved that he will do anything and say anything for a buck. My advice to Clive Palmer regarding Al Gore? Start believing Al Gore when he actually lives the carbon dioxide constrained lifestyle he advocates for everyone else. And make sure that your wallet is in a very secure location when in close proximity to him. Gore will take money for anything.
All right, well, look, I'll be honest there. Look, I don't know Mr Jensen, but I think his view on climate change would be that certainly it does not exist, certainly it is not man-made. So I think it's as much about whacking away.
He's got the same view on climate change as Clive Palmer.
Well, yes, correct. Yes, good point. But the intervention of Al Gore, I mean, it is amazing here that you get to go back to Penrith saying the carbon tax is gone because Al Gore convinced Clive Palmer that if he is going to do it, he should do it. I mean, this is an incredible intervention from a bloke who, if that phone call had never been made, then maybe the carbon tax wasn't going to go. It's extraordinary.
Look, I don't know about that. I agree with Chris's comments. I think Clive Palmer has wanted to get rid of the carbon tax. I would like to believe Clive Palmer at his word to say that he was wanting to get rid of the carbon tax and he was going to vote it down. So, I mean, if we were to take the man at his word, that's what his intentions were, and that was what the new Senate was going to deliver at a minimum, was to at least vote down that part of the carbon tax.
Perhaps it's one of the many reasons I like you, but you're too kind. You're too particularly to bloody Clive Palmer. Nicholas Rees, you get the final word here because in many ways it's going to end up being 3-on-1 here. So you get the last word. Chris, as much as you want to, let's let Nicholas have the last go and then we're off to a break.
Own tab and his own time. So the claim that Paul Jensen was making there is just rubbish, and the fact is a lot of Paul Jensen's views on climate change is pretty out there. I actually want to go back to something Fiona said earlier about the nature of our Westminster system. The fact is you deal with in the Parliament who you need to deal with to get things done, and I would say that Al Gore has rescued around half of the climate package that Julia Gillard, Kevin Rudd put forward, and that's better than nothing, you'd have to say.
You just keep going.
All right, Chris, you get one little sliver. You get one little sliver.
Whatever Nicholas Rees and Al Gore are smoking, I want some on set now.
All right, well, and I've got the jacket for it. All right, quick break. We're back with more. We're live across the country only on Sky News.